But I'm Wes Alexander. I'm the Vice President of Workforce Solutions at Travelers, and I'm lucky enough to be on this Governor's Workforce Council and a part of this DEIA group, along with Anthony Barrett. And really, our fearless leader is Jay Williams. Jay couldn't be here, so I'm stepping in. As we get into this, I just want to make a couple of quick points we can all read, so I'm not going to drain this, but here's what I think is really important. Ground rule number 2, brevity is the word here, right? So if this is people, I understand we get into this and folks get passionate about their opinions, but what I will ask folks to do is think clearly about how crisply you can say what you need to say and get out, because we have others in the group, and I'd like to be able to save space for others. Number 2, just kind of
Excuse me, Wes, can you just enlarge your page a little, please? Thank you.
Oh boy, here we go. Tech stuff.
Thank you.
How about now? Can folks see that?
You're a pro.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes, sir. All right, Amos. Number 2, just keep in mind, you may have a great idea. At the end of the day, it's kind of going to be at the, the whim of and the ultimate suggestion of the committee to whether or not we accept the kind of the reformation or whatever you think needs to be added or subtracted. Billy, I'm going to speak for you without you even knowing it. He's going to take great notes, and I promise. What I will promise is that you will be heard in this space. So whatever you need to say, if you say it quickly and it makes sense and attaches, it will be included. But then ultimately, there'll be some decision makers. So I just want to keep in context, I would hate for anybody to say, I gave this great idea and they didn't take it into consideration. Not the case. It may have been considered, just not chosen. All right. I think it's really important for us to focus on the content. So all of my lawyers and linguistics lovers and email warriors who want to wordsmith every piece of this is not for that. We're going to have a communications person come in, but please fight your urge to say, why don't we say this instead of that? And instead, keep your comments much more strategic, much more thought leadership. That's what this is. The ask here is for thought leadership. So we're going to go through big categories. Let's not start trying to nitty grit into language. That's not going to be valuable for anybody here. So please, let's kind of keep in mind big picture thinking, big thought thinking. With look at the A through F. As we get into this, here's what I'll ask you to think about. What's strong, what's missing. Do you have enough context, or does this need to be flushed out? And again, don't need the words, but just a bracket. Hey, we need to explain this more. That's the sort of thing that we're looking for. Do you feel good about the future state statement? Is there anything from an accomplishment standpoint that folks are missing? And do we feel good about our goals? So again, high level, strategic. Let's not get into the nitty gritty nuance, but let's really think about this at a high level to see if this is meeting needs. Any questions before we dive right in from that?
No questions.
Awesome. All right. So next document here is the workforce plan. I'm going to make this larger for my buddy Amos, and I'm going to get to the part where we begin, which is page 4. So let me make this a little bit bigger. Did everybody see that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Outstanding.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. So, again, I think the way I'd like to do this is kind of just break this into big sections and then submit comment. I don't know if anybody has seen this before, but if you have a place where you want to go because you have a comment that you want to get out, direct us there and we'll go. But if you don't, what I'll just choose to do here is go piece by piece and see if there are any further thoughts. And again, please keep in mind that A through F, strong enough, big picture, you know what I mean? Like, is the context set? Is anything missing? How does this feel from you, from your strategic lens? All right, so if you look on the left here, this is really kind of like mission, vision, statement. So the hope here is that these big picture make sense. I know that these have been discussed before. Anthony, I don't know, by the way, as we go through this, if there's any context that you would like to give as somebody who's really close to this work, but shut me up if you need to dive in as I explain this or add additional context for folks. But my reading of this is that the left-hand side is just, big picture. This is why we are doing the work. These are the commitments that we're going to commit to. And just as a person who works in corporate America here in Connecticut, one thing that sticks out to me is that, there's a continued commitment, not just to diversity and inclusion, but also equity, which has become a bit of a challenging word, I think, in some corporate spaces, and access. right? So doing things fairly, meeting people where they are, filling jobs and trying to do that in a way, as Mark mentioned, we expand the talent pool so that we have the greatest set of people possible in order to work these jobs. So as we look at kind of these four bullets, I guess my question is high level, any concerns, any additions, or any additional context that's needed for anybody to get comfortable with how this reads?
All set.
All right. Okay. All right. Feeling good. All right. Second big area here on page 4 is where are we focusing our energy? All right. And then you see what you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 specific areas that the DEIA group thinks that, when you think about the population of Connecticut, the people that are in jobs, the people who are not in jobs, and the people who are underserved, do these feel like the right places? So, we're talking about returning citizens and people that have, kind of returned back into the workforce from bouts of incarceration or whatever the case may be. So that being a population that needs specific emphasis. Our opportunity youth and the mentioning here is that there's a wide gap of folks between the ages of 16 and 26 who are not working, who are not in school, who are not progressing, who almost feel lost. So again, that feels like a smart place to use and push our resources. Women, not necessarily, I think, as it relates to just sheer employment numbers, but really about leadership and wage gap, right? And making sure that there is kind of equal access from a pay equity standpoint as it relates to women working in jobs in the state. Veterans and our veteran population and finding connection points and places where they can get into the workforce either after prior military service or just coming out.
May I ask a
Oh
question?
yeah, go ahead. Of course.
If everyone has seen up until this point where it says women, could we move the page up so
Oh, my bad.
seeing veterans? Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you.
No, great. Individuals and or people with disabilities, one thing that I just noticed, again, from just a language standpoint, is that we've defined this a couple different ways within the document. I think one thing as a high level, we need to decide, is it going to be individuals or people with disabilities? But that'll be an open item. But again, I think the population that is intended to be served is the same, and just making sure people have accessibility issues, making sure people are overcoming bias and have opportunities to work where it makes sense for them, and then very specifically kind of some work around trying to ensure that Black and Hispanic males continue to find employment, because the numbers show that as you start to break down by demographic, this is a population that seems to be more underserved and underemployed and unemployed than others. So big picture here, again, this is a question for the group and feedback. How do we feel about the key focus populations? Do we feel like anything is missing? Leslie, I will throw to you first.
Yeah, I think what's missing here is a pool of recent immigrants.
Mhm.
And I say that because my program is a healthcare career connect.
Yeah.
And majority of the kind of like the talent pool are recent immigrants, specifically a lot of Haitian people who are coming, just recently entered. So
Yeah.
I feel like it's a growing population and they really are underserved.
Yeah, thanks for that, Leslie. And in fact, if you look later in the document, when we start the breakouts, there's actually an area for immigrants and refugees. So some work is happening, and it was stated here, but not in this gray document. So I think that is at least a good call out for review. Appreciate that. Crystal, I think you were next, and then Mimi, hi after Crystal.
Thank you. I believe it would be appropriate to add transportation to the youth group.
Okay. Tell me what do you mean by that?
Okay, I can't see it anymore, the youth group.
Yeah,
Sorry.
go up. No, this is my fault. There we go.
So, as a barriers such as lack of access to quality education, training programs, and mentorship. Transportation is also a barrier.
I see what you're saying. So adding on to potential barriers, and just Crystal, again, not for nothing, we'll get into some of the transportation work that's happened, but I think that the connection point is duly noted. So
Okay,
appreciate
thank
your
you.
comment there. Yes, ma'am. Hey, Mimi. You're on mute.
Okay, hi everyone. Sorry about that. Yeah, thanks, Wes. So for the Opportunity Youth, just it might be confusing depending on how we're using this document, but we've got 16 to 26 and 14 to 26 denoted in here. I like using 14 to 26 just consistently, although you have to check that it matches with the statistics. So that's just one small note. But the other thing is, yeah, I think I chair the youth subcommittee. So when we came up with recommendations, when we were talking about barriers, it's also those barriers to Crystal's point around housing, transportation, childcare, mental health supports. So I don't know how large this section has to be, but those are really critical components to developing a really strong ecosystem around young people, which we sorely need. There's also, I don't know if we want to speak to this at all, but such intersectionality between a lot of these populations. You know, we have parenting, young moms that are in the Opportunity Youth category, and veterans, and you know, youth with disabilities. So a lot of intersectionality we might want to speak to. And I don't know whether we call it out here or call it out later, but I do think that it's really good to be intentional about talking about young people that are justice involved, experiencing homelessness, foster care youth, like the different subpopulations too.
Yeah, really, really good comments. You know, again, I think the big picture pieces are, hey, let's really think more broadly about what some of the barriers are, to Mimi's point, also to Crystal's point. But I also think, Billy, as you take notes, there may be an opportunity to lean into intersectionality, both either in kind of that mission, vision, purpose, or towards the end when we talk about connecting services together. Because again, I think Mimi makes a great point there. So thanks for that comment. Yes, ma'am.
Can I just say one more thing?
Of course.
About the left-hand side, I know that those are really great, but just to echo some of the needs around data, I know some of you are probably really sick of me talking about this, but Billy's smiling at me. But I think that is a huge piece of this, is like, how do we know who we're serving, or who, you know, these populations are, and how do we know if we're making a difference? So those two questions, I think, need to kind of be front and center in the work that we do. Otherwise, you know, we're putting, you know, we don't have any way of evaluating.
Yeah, a fair point. And again, we'll get there in a second, but towards the end of the document, you know, I think that's an open question that, again, I don't think this group was intended to answer that. I think it was literally just supposed to be an open question, but Mimi, it talks exactly about that. How are we going to measure this, and what data demographics are we going to do to see whether or not we're improving?
Yeah, I'll say, Wes, the harsh reality is that we're not going to be able to capture everything on our strategic plan.
Sure.
But we need really high level to make sure that our content that we're looking to focus on is you know, trending in the right direction, and make sure that we're capturing everything at a high level, because we have to edit this document down. And the work that's being done across all of the subcommittees and vulnerable populations would probably be a 60-page document if we really want to put this together. But for the sake of putting together a strategic plan, we just want to make sure, are we capturing the right content, and what are we missing? And we just need thought partners to make sure we're capturing everyone's voices represented, especially across our state agencies and our community organizations, to make sure it's in line with what the industry and the market is telling us.
Fair. Okay. All right. Thanks for that. Next up for me is Robin. Hi.
Hi. Nice to see everyone. I'm Robin Sharp, Easter Seals, Capital Region. We work with people with disabilities and veterans, and I co-chair the group on subcommittee on veterans. So somebody mentioned transportation. I think on the left side, when we're talking about big picture stuff, infrastructure, when it comes to transportation, accessible transportation, and digital access, something has to be in there about looking at examining the state's infrastructure and bringing that up to speed, as well as all of the other wonderful things that we're doing.
Yeah, Robin, can you give me like maybe just a quick example, or maybe Billy, so he can kind of put that in the notes? Like from an infrastructure standpoint, like what do you mean?
I mean, public transportation, right, to access.
Okay, straight
jobs.
up, like
Straight up, public
transportation. Yep.
transportation, accessible public transportation to get
Yep.
to jobs. Yeah, I've got people that
Yeah.
gotta take 3, 4 buses, and depending on where they live, there may not be a bus. So, you know, different parts of the state are not, the access is not
Got it.
equitable.
Got
And
it.
then on the veteran side, one of the things that we're looking at is attracting and retaining our veteran talent, right? So getting people, you know, where we have to reach them as they're transitioning out of the military, and making Connecticut a veteran-friendly state as compared to the other states around us, because believe it or not, we're not as veteran-friendly as our surrounding states.
Got it. And so as you think about the obstacles, you're really talking about the training piece and having people ready to go.
Yeah, getting
Okay.
them here, keeping them, making them want to stay here, right?
Got
So
it.
retaining them. So some public policy solutions to this stuff as well.
Got it.
Yep.
Noted. Billy, you good? You hanging in there? All right. Tomas, did I say that correctly, sir?
Yes, sir.
Okay, Tomas, you're up.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm working City Challenge in Waterbury. So based on my work, I don't know if this will fall under the immigration opportunities or opportunities for immigrants, but I think that adding something in there in terms of multilingual, bilingual job training opportunities for non-English speaking individuals is crucial.
Yeah. Okay. Yep. Perfect comment. Duly noted. Yep. It's a great ad. Thanks, Tomas. Mark.
A term that's frequently used with respect to returning citizens and barriers is collateral consequences, which is a broader term than simply job training. It's access to housing, healthcare, funding for education. Transportation is certainly a barrier as well. And I think it's a continuing issue that often not only creates unemployment, but underemployment.
Yeah.
And so I think I think it's a term that's frequently used in that context and might be worth incorporating into the language there.
Yeah.
And then also maybe somehow to reflect that it's the justice impacted those directly involved, and then justice involved and then justice impacted. It's the families, the children that also suffer from those collateral consequences.
Yeah. All right. Point taken, Mark. I mean, that's just really what I hear underlying that is it's really broadening and looking at a more full picture. So I think that's a really, really good comment.
And then I think some of the barriers that others are mentioning are equally applicable across all the categories.
Yeah, I think you're right. Collateral consequences. Okay. Showing up as Dukas D.
Hi, I'm Dave Dokas. I'm actually the state director of the Connecticut Public Vocational Rehabilitation Program.
Hey, Dave.
Hi, nice to see you, Wes. A point I wanted to make was that although there are 6 specific key focus populations mentioned here, the presence of disability cuts across each one of those. The intersectionality involved here was a point that was already made. I just wanted to underscore that related to disability.
Yeah.
And with that in mind, one of the things that I think we need to be careful about is related to access. We've brought up the issues related to transportation access, and there are physical barriers certainly for people with disabilities. But one of the issues that's really faced by these individuals is the infrastructure of Connecticut in terms of accessibility to services that are needed. There needs to be an emphasis on the development of the workforce of people who work with individuals with disabilities. And that's an area which we are very much hurting in right now. We have access in forms of communication for people who are deaf, people who are monolingual Spanish, but we also have access to getting the kind of services that would be required to prepare for, enter, or maintain employment. There are a lot of people in Connecticut with potential to fill some of those 80,000 jobs that the governor mentioned before, and the unavailability of services to assist them in training for and entering that employment is definitely a barrier.
Got it. Good. Thank you. Again, broadening and just giving context. So that's helpful. Okay. All right. Moving down, seeing no further hands as it relates to this particular piece. This slide here is just a fact slide, so I don't think there's any need to talk about the chart, but it just kind of reemphasizes why the Black male and Hispanic male kind of unemployment is an area of focus. I think the best place to move would be future state, and really just making sure, again, from a comment standpoint, does this resonate with folks? I think this is something that's been talked through, but workforce that reflects the diversity of its population, meets the needs of its economy, and provides equitable access to high quality jobs. I think that's a statement that Mark also read. But this is the thing that we should be laddering up to. And if there are any additional thoughts, again, you could put them in the chat or just let Billy know. That'd be great. But I think the next place I'll go after that is really the work to date, and just making sure we're not missing anything that you feel should be highlighted. And keeping in mind, to Anthony's point, we already probably have more than what we need right now, so there are going to have to be some cuts. But I just wanted to talk a little bit, kind of committee through committee, and then also kind of just some of the larger initiatives that cut across a lot of different pieces and dimensions of diversity here. So, as you get into committee work, here's the BIPOC, some of the work that's happening, addressing systemic barriers, and there's going to be some data that needs to be attached to that, encouraging diversity hiring initiatives and bias training for employees. That's just making sure that people who make hiring decisions understand the subjectivity that can potentially go into decision making. Work that the Veterans Committee has worked on, and again, I won't drain it. Maybe I'll just throw it up here. And as folks, if you see anything that, again, you feel like should be added or supplemented, let me know. But here's the work for the veteran on these 3 points. The returning citizens bucket. Youth, then women. And again, you see the places where there still needs to be some additional support attached. Yes, Mimi.
A question. How did you all come up with these things?
That I can't answer, other than probably just continued communications with folks in the committees, but not from me. This would be Jay and Anthony. So let me kind of defer. Anthony, do you have was there a source of record that y'all used to come up with these highlights for each committee group? Was it going back through notes that had been developed through meetings? I don't know what the process was. Did I lose Anthony?
I don't know. I'm just wondering, because I chaired the youth subcommittee, and we didn't do these. So I don't know. I'm just asking who.
Yeah, and again, I wasn't a part of this process. I just saw the end. So let me, maybe just a note, Billy, for us is, can we double back and just determine kind of how these particular highlights were chosen, particularly for those who run committees?
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry about it.
I don't feel comfortable representing that as part of the work of the committee, unless we bring it to the committee for what we want to emphasize.
I lost service a little bit, so I kind of missed the question. Wes,
sorry, Anthony.
Go ahead, Mimi.
Well, just wondering how these were arrived at, if they weren't attached to the committees, like who came up with the language for these?
Yeah, so we pulled out, the hard part of it is that we can't put everything in there. So we want to be able to align with things that are, we know, like the DEIA on disconnected youth is very important. There's a lot of work that's being done. So we want to make sure we highlight that. But in a lot of the work that was done around the campaign for working cities and potential fiscal asks to be to support everything that you kind of, aforementioned around mental health, housing supports, and for disconnected youth. So we wanted to at least capture some of the key work that's been done by the committee, but we can't capture every single aspect. So that's the part where we're having some challenge. Like, what are the things that we should make sure we highlight? And I think the work that's being done around the work that was done on the Camping Working City report and some youth employment, and making sure that we're getting disconnected youth really engaged. I think that's something we don't want to miss. But I think
Yeah.
overall
I just don't feel comfortable putting something in as if it came from the committee, because this, like, who's choosing what
it's
to
not,
put in? I don't want to
yeah,
be a pain here, that we don't have,
but
we can
Mimi,
talk about it
let me be
offline, but
very, no, let me be very clear. It's not just solely just the committee. It's really the work of the state and all the efforts that's being pushed forward. The committee
okay, so
helps
as long as you're not representing it, that it's coming from
no, the
the
committee helps support.
DEIA
No, the
committee.
committee helps supports this work, and we support it for several reasons. Our office timestamped a lot of that work that's being supported across multiple partners, but we want to make sure we're doing these things intentional to be able to support youth population.
And just to add, Marianne, I think what I hear you saying is, hey, you know, as the person who chairs the committee, I just want to make sure that the work doesn't get represented, that this all came from the committee, right? Like, so I think it's just making, and I that's why I scrolled up for a second. I think one could read it that way, Anthony and Billy. So I think it's just clarity to ensure that these are the areas that touch these committee areas, but it's not necessarily representing the work of the committee. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think the way it will be written, but these are all initiatives that are supporting these populations, and I think that's where how you have to more so look at it. We're not singling out, hey, this one person is responsible for all this work. The reentry committee is not responsible for overall vocational village or the toolkit. It's a collective body across multiple different stakeholders that's leading this effort. But how do we acknowledge that these efforts are underway in the state of Connecticut? And that's really more so what we need to bring to the table.
Yeah, I just, you know, I think it's a process question that, you know, this committee's been meeting for 2 years and has come up with a lot of really good recommendations, and to not see some of those reflected in the work of the committee, and to have things that we haven't really dug into in here. I'm just wondering, like, where did this come from? And it, you know, we are in the DEIA committee now, right? And this is
Mimi,
the plan that's emanating from it. So I don't know.
So Mimi, if I can jump in, this is the right time for you to articulate what you think that should be on here. This is the perfect venue for it. So if you think that there's something that should be top of mind, or if you have at least your top 3 as a chair, share it. This is a perfect opportunity for us to capture that.
Yeah, I mean, again, I would want to take this back to the committee. You know, we didn't have this to share with the committee at the last time we just met. I don't want to decide on my own, but I do think that, you know, people have been putting some hard work and thinking about things, and I just would want to have some agreement that this is what our subcommittee thinks is most important.
Yeah, Mimi, I think what you say makes sense. Hey, Anthony, how about if we do this? Can we just kind of, again, put a note to ensure that the committees that have worked on this, even more specifically, you know, beyond this public forum, you know, just get one extra look at, hey, here are the bullets that we're putting in, you know, Mimi, are you comfortable? You know, Genevieve, are you comfortable? You know, the different folks that run the committees kind of get a look at it. I don't know what our timing is for this, but that just from a process standpoint, to Mimi's point, I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. All right. So again, as you look at this, again, there's an inconsistency here in terms of persons with disabilities or individuals. I think that needs to be squared, but from a content standpoint, I want you all to have an opportunity to see that. And then the last one down at the bottom, again, a little inconsistency. Jill, I'm coming to you. But, you know, we didn't mention it in the sheet on page 4, but then mention it here, you know, should there be consistency of messaging around immigrants and refugees and some of the other points that you all made from that population needing specific intentional support. Yes, Jill.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Somebody has their mic on, number one, so I'm having a hard time hearing. If we could check. And number 2, I welcome the fact of receiving this, each committee receiving this, so we can talk about it, because I'm conscious of our time here before the breakout. But with the person with disability group, you know, the windmills is a very big part of it, but it's really that header, that bullet is employer engagement, because there's many trainings being offered to employers. And again, we can do this offline, but
Yeah.
I just wanted to point that out for today's meeting. As well as the third bullet on accessible and adaptive technologies. It's really accessibility in general that will
Okay.
include adaptive technologies in the American Job Center system. So thank you
Got
very
it.
much, everybody.
Yep, got it. Thanks for that clarity. Hi, Eileen.
Hi, Wes. Thank you. I just want to add that I think there needs to be something in this section that talks about competitive, integrated employment.
Competitive in which section?
And people with disabilities.
Yeah, competitive, integrated employment.
Correct.
Okay. Awesome.
And Eileen, just for clarification, can you say what that is in comparison to?
It's in comparison to enclaves. It's in comparison to sheltered workshops. That the emphasis is on quality jobs that are integrated into everybody else's work life.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Billy, it may help to know it's really to adding to what Eileen said, it's in comparison to people working in sub-minimum wage situations underneath wage certificates.
Yeah. Got it. All right. So we ran out of time here, but I guess the last thing I'll share is that, these were a few of the initiatives that, again, cut across, I think, a couple of different dimensions of diversity, as Mark mentioned, the work with the Blue Ribbon panel and, the work that 2Gen is doing to try and fight against benefit clips where people come off assistance and then their situations are worse than they were. Transportation, which again has come up in several kind of capacities here, both in access, but then also infrastructure, which I think was a really good add. The adults basic education and trying to make sure that work continues, and then the career accelerator and the website. I know the breakout room is going to close. Anthony, I don't know what the process is for people to actually take a look at this beyond this forum, other than the folks